Okay, so tonight we will talk about how to boost our React Redux application performance with selectors, and we'll focus on Reselect. So before we start, I'm Anna Maria, and I'm a software developer in Gousto. I've been here for 2 years now, and here I learned like a lot, not just about performance and how important performance is, but also about like DevOps things, security and architecture principles. And all this was possible because we were quite cross-functional, and we were cross-functional not only in tech, but also with food team and marketing and other teams. Before being a software engineer in Gousto, I've worked in IBM, where was also my first job in tech, and also had an opportunity to present at the meetup in my first 6 months, I think, in my career. So quite exciting. So what is Gousto? I'm sure some of you at least heard about Gousto. Gousto is a data-driven company that sells recipe boxes. We have at least 55 recipes on the menu each week, sometimes more, depends on the choice. From those 55 recipes, you can add in your box up to 4 recipes each week. And then our partner couriers will just bring the box with all the ingredients and the recipe card with cooking instruction to your door. And yeah, as I mentioned before, working cross-functionally actually helped me to understand how much is important that the website is performant, not only for our customers, but also for our company and for our tech team. So we will discuss today about why is performance important, what are selectors and Reselect, why should we use selectors, and I'll give you a small quick overview of how we use selectors in Gousto. Let's start. So why is performance important? So from company point of view, bad performance means users will leave the website. No one really wants to see that loading state on the screen. Also, conversion will drop because users leave the website. That means the company will have to suffer from the revenue point of view. And there was a study that says, like 2 years back, that each second of waiting the website to load will lose at least 7% of traffic, and that's quite a lot. And also, if it's performant, your website is ranked, if it's less performant, will be ranked lower in the search engines. And also good performance means better user experience. But not only for company point of view, performance is important, but also from the developer's point of view. So it's easier to do local development because the application will be faster. Usually it's easier to understand the code. A performant code, from my experience, it's nicely wrote and you can actually understand what it's doing. It's modularized and all those things. Also, most of the time, better performance will be lower cost to host the application. And it's really important to have lower cost when you have a lot of services. And that's just me when I've seen that code that I wrote a few years ago. So what is this code about? Is just a short application that will just show some products and will group them based on the categories. And this is just one React component that will just get the categories and products from the state, from the Redux state, but all the other logic to actually filter the products based on that category that's selected, to filter the products based on a search string, also to show only categories that have actually products. All that logic was done in the component, in the React component. So let's see how the application actually works with all that code inside the React component. As you can see, it's a bit slow to just load the page because we need to do all the rendering there and on the logic. Also, as you can see, because of that logic, the state will update a few times. So the main component is practically the page. The header is those categories here, And the product is just this list. So all these 3 components are rendering 3 times just when you land on the page. And for who works with React, we know that React is super useful when it comes to understand what parts of the DOM to actually update. But when you put that to update 3 times the same part of the state, that can cost a lot. And this is a small application, but imagine a big one. So not only that renders 3 times, also when you just change the category, so you will need to render a different list of products, again, all those components will render again. And that's mainly because all the logic happens in the main component. That's the one that's parent to the whole page. When you will search in the products, again, all components will render again. And you can see that, again, that's quite a lot of updates on the DOM. And we don't really want to see that in a big application. This is a small one, so you'll probably not see that much. But how can we increase the performance of that application? So there are some main rules. We should add the data to the Redux, the one that we needed. We should move the logic outside the React component, so just handles UI changes with a set of data that will be received. We should connect each component that needs the data to store. So we avoid re-rendering all 3 components that we've seen in the example. But keeping everything in Redux state doesn't mean actually everything. We should keep just the minimum amount of properties. So all the computation of data, all the kind of filtering of data we want to do, we shouldn't really keep it in Redux state, because then our store will just increase. It will be really hard to find something there. So how can we actually solve this problem? So in order to do that, we will need to talk about selectors. So what is a selector? It's a function that gets a Redux state as a parameter and returns a part of the state without transforming it. And this is called non-memoized selector, because all it does is just getting something from the state based on what you are telling it to do. So we have here a few examples. Get selected category. We'll just go to the state and get the selected category. So here you'll see practically what I have in the state for that application. I have products, I have categories, and I also have the search string. Why we talk about selector if they are just picking a piece of the state? So where is the performance improvement? But we haven't finished. So let's talk about Reselect, and then let's put them together. So what is Reselect? It's a library that allows us to create selectors that can compute derived data, allowing Redux to store the minimal possible state, are efficient. A selector is not recomputed unless one of the arguments changes, are composable. They can be used as inputs to other selectors. And I would like to just point you to this image on the corner. It's just like a child game. You just put together a circle as a triangle, and the Reselect will just, output a square. So that's kind of the magic what Reselect will do. So Reselect will provide you this function create selector in order to create memoized selectors. If you want to read more about this, Redux official website has more details about this. But let's see how they actually help us with performance. So why should we use them? In order to do that, let's see this example. So where's my pointer? I'm hoping you can follow me. So as you can see at the top of this code, you'll have some non-memoized selectors that will just pick something from the state. We'll have one memoized selector. And what that does is, if you look at that, I wish I can see my pointer. But if you look at that, sorry for, it's quite new to me to present on Zoom. That create selector function will get as an input few methods. And in this case, we have just 2. Get products, that's a selector that will get products from the state, and get selected category, that's another selector that gets the selected category from the state. And you can see a third function, and that's called the result function. Where the products and select category parameter on that function comes from, they come from the functions above. So that's how create selector works. It's just getting all the functions you want to input in that at the top, and then the last one will be the result function that will get all the in the parameters all the results of the functions above. So you can use that. So I've used those to filter those products based on the category. At the product level, we had categories that that products belongs to. So I was just filtering and see if in those categories I can find the category that's selected. And then if you look at the next one, this is highlighting a compose selector. And you can see here that we've used as an input to this new selector, get filtered products. We used the previous selectors, the previous memoir selector, filtered products by category selector. And we add a new one that gets search string. And in that case, again, the result of those two functions will come in the result function as parameters, and we can do some more logic there. Now, what is important to know is the result of this selector will be cached until one of those inputs will change. So for example, if we look at the filter product by category selector, if the products in the state will change, or if the selected category in the state will change, that selector will run again and will do again the logic. But unless those change, that will not be called again. We'll just return you whenever you call it with the same parameters. We'll just return you that value that was already cached. And it's quite easy to just connect it to a component. So all we need to do is to connect the component to the Redux store. So just import the connect from React Redux and connect it with map state to props. And we call our selector passing in the state. And our, I'm going back 1 second, our create selector will practically get that state and just send it down to all the functions that are as input. So that's how those functions will get a state. So quite easy to just implement it, but let's see the result. So we have our new, just refreshed, our new page with selectors. And as you can see here, this main page, because now doesn't have any more logic, doesn't render more than once when just the first time when you land on the website. And then we have some, so create select categories filter, that's just filtering some categories. And then our product by category selector. That's the one that will calculate which are the products in the selected category. And then by search, because as you've seen, we composed that selector. So this is actually the one that we use in the application. And because this changed, this will change again. Oops. Sorry. So as you've seen, like we just call those selectors. Now, when we change category, because the category changed, that selector will be called again, and also the search. But what we will see is, in a second, also you see that only the products is rendered, not all three components, so that's a good point. And here you can see that when we search for product, because the category didn't change, that selector wasn't called again, so it was just calling the search one. That means that in order to recalculate the products in that category, we just use that cached value that we already have, and we just apply the search on the second selector. So that's kind of saving us some performance, and that's just a simple logic. So what we've seen in the video is that the main component, that's the page, doesn't render more than once. The product component is connected to the store, and that allows us to handle the logic in our selectors, and also just render just the product component when we do changes. Using selectors, we don't need to recalculate again the filter recipe by category when we do a search, so we save some computation time there. So this was just one selector and one like simple filter, but just imagine how you can save a lot of computation in other kind of scenarios. So I'm gonna go to just show you on the website how we use them in Gousto. I'm not allowed to show the code. So this is our Gousto website. You can select the delivery date, and based on the delivery date, we will have some recipes in collections. So it's quite similar to our example. And what you can see here is this collection, we have these recipes, and you can also see some details of the recipes. What we do is, because we also have some stock for that specific day, we need to show only the recipes that are in stock at the top of the page, and at the bottom, just the ones that are out of stock. So in order to do that, we will use selectors to just memorize the recipes in that specific collection that's selected. And then when we apply the stock sorting, so if it's in stock at the top of the list, if it's not at the bottom, we will just use that memoized day. So we don't need to do that every time when a change happens on this page. Also, if I'm going on, that would be memoized in the stage. So that's quite a lot of logic for us, because it involves stock and other kind of business logic behind. So it saves us probably half second to just render one collection. That's quite a lot. So as you can see here, again, when we change that, again, just showing the recipes from that category will memorize that state. And also, just in order to not send down properties to components, because that will mean a lot of renders, we'll connect, for example, this recipe card component, we call it, we'll connect it to Redux, and we just send an ID. And because that ID will not change, but maybe stock can change meanwhile, that component will just take the ID and will calculate based on the selector. So we have like one memory selector per component. So we will have like an instance of that selector. We will calculate the state, and we will just take from the state whatever properties we need to show on that component. This is our like detail page. Again, the same principle. We are just sending the ID that is the ID that's needed for that recipe. And then all the other props, we take them from the state with selectors. So in this way, we don't send down properties in order to render too many components. And selectors are, like, I would say, a new thing to Gousto. It's like 2 years ago when I joined, we just introduced them. And for me, I didn't really understand why we do that, but it was quite cool because all the logic was in one place and wasn't like just passed down to all of the components. So for developer point of view, it was quite cool. But then I start to understand how it's actually helping the application. And we improved our load time from was like 6 seconds to just render the page with all the logic to I think now it's like around 4 with all the logic that's involving all the calls to the backend and actually rendering the page to actually see it. So it's a huge improvement if you just use selectors and memorize the things that you know that will not change that often. So why should we use selectors? If you don't know by now, I don't know. So you've seen a lot of improvements just in that example application. But also, like, when do we need to think about selectors? Like, in which cases? So I just put together like 4 examples here. When you filter some set of data, like our search product, you don't want to recalculate all that logic before actually filtering those products. So you want to have that already calculated, and you should have probably put it in the state, because that will, as I said, that will just grow your Redux store. And sometimes it's good to put in Redux, but sometimes it's just going to grow the store, and passing down is not that helpful. So when you have that kind of situation, just use the Reselect. When you have to sort some set of data, if you want the data to show in a different order, so as I give you the example of the stock recipes that on Gousto page, so the stock ones at the top and out of stock at the bottom. Again, because we don't want to recalculate all the logic for recipes that should show in that collection again and again, we just calculate that once and memorize it. When you need to combine some data, so as we had the product by category, in Gousto, again, we have recipes by the category. That's quite similar, but also recipes in basket, for example, which recipes are in our basket. Again, that's another example. And when you have different components that need the same set of data, but only one property change. So for example, in our example with product list, if we will have, for example, 2 product lists, that will just be, let's say, one will have the products that are, I don't know, under £3, and the other list will just have the rest of them. Because those products for that specific category will be memorized in that selector, we just need to apply the price limit in a different selector, and we can compose them. So again, that will save us some performance. And if you want to read more about this, beside the official documentation, I also found some to Stack Overflow explanation of that quite helped me a lot to understand how they actually work.